The Great Hall of the Galactic Council buzzed with worried voices as beings from 47 different worlds gathered for an emergency meeting. The huge chamber, built from crystal that sparkled like stars, had never felt so tense. Representatives, with scales, fur, tentacles, and stranger features, all shared the same look of confusion and fear. Ambassador Zethkri tapped his sharp fingers on the black stone table. His four eyes kept looking at the empty seats where the human delegates should have been sitting. For 200 years, those seats had never been empty during a council meeting. Humans always showed up, usually making noise about trade deals or complaining about some rule they thought was unfair. But today, silence filled the space where human voices should have been. Chancellor Morrison stood at the center of the room. The old creature had lived for over 1,000 years and had seen many strange things, but nothing like this. His deep voice carried across the chamber as he spoke to the gathered aliens. Friends from across the galaxy, we face something that has never happened before. The humans have stopped talking to us completely. 3 weeks ago, we got the last message from any human ship or station. A holographic image appeared above the table, showing a tired-looking man in a blue uniform. Captain Jake Morrison of the exploration ship Aurora's Edge looked normal enough, but his words would be the last anyone heard from humanity for a long time. "Survey complete," the recording said. "Found something interesting in the Kepler void. We'll report back soon." That was it. No other messages came after that. No follow-up reports. No requests for supplies. No angry complaints about council policies. The humans had simply gone quiet, and that scared everyone more than any threat they had ever faced. Commander Lisa Grant had been running the busy human colony on Meridian Prime. Her station handled thousands of ships every day, with humans buying, selling, and arguing about everything from rare metals to exotic foods. 2 days after Jake's message, her station went dark too. The last transmission was just her saying goodnight to the night shift. Trade routes that humans had carved through, dangerous asteroid fields sat empty. Smuggling paths that only humans were crazy enough to use showed no traffic. Even the illegal gambling stations where humans like to spend their money reported 0 visitors. The Zephyrian ambassador, a creature that looked like a floating jellyfish, made of silver light, shimmered with anxiety. "Perhaps they have all returned to their home worlds," it suggested. Though its voice wavered with doubt, everyone in the room knew that made no sense. Humans did not retreat. They moved forward into danger, explored places others feared to go, and found solutions to problems that seemed impossible. When other species said something could not be done, humans took that as a personal challenge. The warrior-like Brutanians, who stood over 8 feet tall and had arms like tree trunks, shifted uncomfortably in their seats. They had fought humans in small conflicts before and learned to respect their stubborn refusal to give up. A Brutanian general named Groktar spoke up, his voice like grinding rocks. "We sent scouts to 3 human outposts near our territory, all empty but not destroyed. The buildings still had power, food was still fresh in storage, and the defense systems were still active. It was like they all just walked away at the same time." Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been working on quantum research at a station on the edge of human space. Her experiments with faster-than-light communication had helped the Council create better networks between distant worlds. Her lab had been sending automated data reports every day for 6 months. Then, nothing. The silence from her station was particularly troubling because her work was too important to abandon. She had been close to breakthrough discoveries that could change how the entire galaxy communicated. No human scientist would walk away from work like that unless something incredible had happened. A small, mouse-like creature from the planet, Squeaks, raised a tiny paw. Despite their size, the Squeaks were brilliant mathematicians who helped run the Council's computer systems. "We analyzed all human communication patterns for the past year," the creature squeaked. "There were no signs of preparation for mass departure, no increase in supply orders, no unusual ship movements, no coded messages between colonies." That made the situation even stranger. If humans had planned to leave, their chaotic nature meant someone would have leaked information or complained about the plan. Humans were terrible at keeping secrets from each other, let alone from the rest of the galaxy. The synthoids, artificial beings made of living metal and light, ran constant calculations trying to understand what had happened. Their leader, a tall figure that gleamed like polished silver, spoke in electronic tones. Probability analysis suggests external intervention, but our sensors detect no signs of attack, disease, or technological interference. The humans appear to have coordinated a simultaneous withdrawal from all known positions, which contradicts their established behavioral patterns. Fear crept through the chamber like a cold wind. The galaxy had grown used to having humans around even if they were off in trouble. Human traders brought goods from dangerous places others would not visit. Human explorers found new worlds and resources. Human engineers solved problems with creative solutions that made other species uncomfortable, but worked amazingly well. Most importantly, humans kept the old powers honest. The ancient empires that had once ruled through fear and control had to behave better with humans around. The chaotic, unpredictable nature of humanity meant that traditional methods of domination simply did not work against them. Ambassador Velktar, a snake-like being from the old hegemony, coiled nervously in his chair. What if they found something out there? Something that made them all decide to leave at once? The question hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Everyone knew humans well enough to understand that they did not run from danger. If they had found something scary, they would have called for help, brought weapons, or tried to study it. They would not have just disappeared. Chancellor Morden looked around the chamber at all the worried faces. Beings who had lived for centuries, who had survived wars and disasters, now looked lost without the chaotic energy that humans brought to everything they touched. We will send investigation teams to human space, he decided. We need to know what happened to them, and we need to know soon. The galaxy has become dependent on human involvement in ways we are only now beginning to understand. As the council meeting ended and representatives began to leave, each carrying the weight of unprecedented uncertainty, one thing became clear to everyone present. The silence of humanity was not just mysterious, it was terrifying. In a galaxy where humans had always been the ones asking uncomfortable questions and pushing into dangerous unknowns, their absence left a void that nothing else could fill. The hunt for answers would begin immediately, but deep down, every being in that chamber feared what they might find in the empty spaces where human voices should have been. Captain Corthune had been a council security officer for over 50 years, but he had never seen anything like the human colony of New Austin. His team moved through the empty streets of what had been one of the loudest, most chaotic places in the galaxy, and the silence felt wrong in every possible way. The mining town had been famous throughout council space for its wild atmosphere. Human miners would work 16-hour shifts pulling rare metals from dangerous asteroids, then spend their free time in bars that could be heard from orbit. Fights broke out every night, not from anger, but from the sheer joy humans seemed to take in testing themselves against each other. Now the streets were empty but not abandoned. Lieutenant Sivana checked her scanner readings for the 10th time, hoping to find some explanation for what they were seeing. Captain, the food in the restaurants is still warm. Some of these meals were prepared less than 4 hours ago, but there are no life signs anywhere in the colony. They walked through the main street, past shops that still had their lights on, and their doors open. The automated systems were running perfectly, keeping the colony maintained as if the humans might return at any moment. Street cleaners moved along their programmed routes, removing dust from walkways that no one was using. In the central cantina, the famous Red Rock Saloon, they found tables set for meals that would never be eaten. Playing cards were scattered across poker tables as if players had simply stood up and walked away in the middle of their games. The jukebox in the corner was still playing old Earth music, filling the empty room with songs about home and adventure. But there were no signs of panic, no overturned chairs, no broken glasses. Everything looked like the humans had calmly decided to leave and would be back later for their drinks. "Look at this," called out Sergeant Vextor from behind the bar. The reptilian officer held up a handwritten note that had been left next to the cash register. In simple English it read, "Gone to check out something amazing. Keep the lights on for us, we'll be back with stories. Pete, owner." The investigation team spent 3 days searching every building in New Austin. They found similar notes throughout the colony, all written in the casual, friendly tone that humans used when they were excited about something. None of the notes mentioned danger, fear, or emergency evacuation. They all sounded like humans had found something interesting and wanted to go look at it. The pattern was the same on every human world they visited. On Terra Nova, an agricultural colony known for growing food that could survive in almost any environment, the greenhouses were still producing crops under the care of automated systems. Mayor Bill Tucker's office had a half-finished report about harvest yields glowing on his computer screen, but the mayor was nowhere to be found. Dr. Thilmax, the council's expert on alien behavior, ran detailed scans of the human living areas. What he found disturbed him more than any evidence of violence or disaster would have. They prepared for a long absence, he reported to the investigation team. Food storage systems have been upgraded for extended autonomous operation. Water purification plants have been given enough supplies to run for years without maintenance. Even the local wildlife has been provided with automated feeding stations. This was not the behavior of people fleeing in panic or being forced to leave against their will. The humans had taken time to make sure their colonies would survive without them, as if they cared about these places and planned to return someday. The colony of Haven's Rest provided the most detailed clues about human intentions. The community message board in the town center had dozens of notes from different families and individuals, all saying goodbye in their own way. Going on the adventure of a lifetime. Tell my cousin Jerry I'll send him a postcard from wherever we end up. The Martinez family. Kids, if you come looking for us, don't worry. We're following something incredible. Take care of the flower garden until we get back. Mom and Dad. To whoever finds this, we found something in the deep dark that changes everything. Going to investigate. The house key is under the fake rock by the door if anyone needs to use the place. Charlie and Susan. Every note was written by hand, personal and warm, as if the humans were going on vacation rather than disappearing from galactic civilization. There was no fear in their words, no goodbye messages for enemies, no warnings about danger, just excitement and anticipation. The industrial world of Forge Point gave the investigation team their biggest surprise. The massive factories that produced goods for trade throughout the galaxy were still running at full capacity, operated entirely by artificial intelligence systems that humans had installed over the years. These AI systems were incredibly advanced, capable of managing complex production schedules and adapting to changing market demands. But what shocked the investigators was a message left in the central computer system's main directory. To whom it may concern, we've gone to join something bigger than ourselves. Keep producing the goods everyone needs. We'll be back to check on things eventually. If you need to contact us, well, we'll know when you do. Thanks for everything. The management. The message was signed by over 300 human workers, engineers, and managers. Every person who had been involved in running the factories had added their name to the farewell note, as if they were all part of some grand plan that they had agreed to together. But the most unsettling discovery came from the human research station orbiting the dangerous pulsar system of Cerberus. Chief Scientist Amy Foster had left a holographic message that played automatically when anyone accessed the station's main computer. The message showed Foster standing in her laboratory, looking excited rather than afraid. Behind her, complex star charts covered every wall, showing regions of space that the Council had marked as too dangerous for exploration. If you're seeing this message, it means we've started the next phase of our journey, Foster said in the recording. We've been studying signals from places that aren't supposed to exist, and we finally figured out what they mean. There are others out there, ancient civilizations that found ways to step beyond the normal rules of space and time. Foster gestured to the star charts behind her, pointing to areas marked with symbols that hurt to look at directly. We've made contact with entities that exist in the spaces between dimensions. They've been fighting a war for millions of years and they need our help. Not because we're the strongest or smartest species in the galaxy, but because we're the most unpredictable. They need chaos in their perfect order and we're the best at being beautifully chaotic. The holographic Foster smiled with the kind of expression humans got when they were about to do something dangerous and exciting. We're not disappearing forever. We're evolving. By the time you see this message, every human in the galaxy will be learning things that will change how we understand reality itself. Tell the Council not to worry about us. We're going to come back with knowledge that will help everyone. The message ended with coordinates pointing to regions of space where ancient civilizations had vanished without explanation, where the laws of physics seemed to break down, and where Council ships had never dared to venture. As the investigation teams returned to Council space with their reports, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The humans had not been taken or forced to leave. They had chosen to abandon everything they had built in normal space to pursue something that existed beyond the understanding of every other species in the galaxy. They had gone willingly into the unknown, and somewhere in the darkness between stars, they were learning secrets that could change the nature of existence itself. The question that haunted every council member was simple but terrifying. When the humans eventually returned, would they still be human? Or would they have become something else entirely, something that might view their former allies as obstacles to whatever grand plan they had joined? The silence was no longer just mysterious. It was the quiet before a storm that might reshape everything they thought they knew about reality. Dr. Xenorth had been studying space signals for over a century, and he thought he understood how the universe communicated with itself. Stars sent out regular pulses of radiation, black holes twisted space-time in predictable ways, and even the mysterious dark matter between galaxies followed patterns that made sense to trained scientists. But the signals coming from the Kepler void made no sense at all. The veteran astrophysicist stood in his laboratory aboard the Council's deep space monitoring station, staring at readouts that hurt his multiple brains to comprehend. The signals arrived on frequencies that should not exist, carried information in mathematical patterns that seemed to exist in more dimensions than normal space allowed, and somehow reached every corner of the galaxy at the exact same moment. This is impossible, he muttered to his assistant, a young crystalline being named Shardara whose body could naturally process complex mathematical equations. These transmissions are violating basic laws of physics. Nothing can travel faster than light. But these signals are arriving everywhere simultaneously. Shardara's crystal body flickered with confused patterns as she tried to process the data. Dr. Xenorth, the signals are not just faster than light. They appear to be arriving before they were sent. Our chronometer readings show the signals, reaching distant systems several minutes before our instruments detect them leaving their source. The implications of backward traveling information made Xenorth's head tentacles ache. If signals could arrive before they were sent, then cause and effect, the foundation of all scientific understanding, was being rewritten by whatever was broadcasting from the void. But the truly disturbing part was not the signals themselves. It was the responses. Commander Velnox had been monitoring deep space from Watchtower 7, a station positioned at the very edge of Council territory. His job was to watch for threats from unknown regions, but what he found was far stranger than any invasion fleet. Council Command, this is Watchtower 7 reporting massive structural anomalies. Velnox's voice crackled across the communication network. We're detecting constructs emerging from regions that our maps show as empty space. These are not ships or stations. They appear to be structures that exist partially in our dimension and partially somewhere else. The images that Velnox transmitted to Council headquarters showed geometric shapes that hurt to look at directly. Massive constructs that seemed to be built from crystallized spacetime itself, floating in areas where no matter should exist. Some appeared solid from one angle and transparent from another. Others seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, casting shadows that moved independently of their source. The constructs are responding to the signals from the Kepler void, Velnox continued. Every time we detect a transmission from human space, these structures pulse with energy and seem to grow larger. It's as if they're being activated by whatever the humans discovered out there. Dr. Xenorth worked frantically with teams of the ARD galaxy's best scientists to decode the transmissions, but every attempt led to the same frustrating conclusion. The mathematical principles behind the signals required thinking patterns that were fundamentally alien to every known species in the Council. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Abandoned human research notes. Lieutenant Ray Peterson had been working at the human science station Galileo Point, conducting theoretical research that most council scientists had dismissed as impossible fantasy. His laboratory had been left exactly as he had been using it, with complex equations covering every wall and experimental equipment still humming with power. Peterson, ES research focused on something he called dimensional archaeology, the study of civilizations that had evolved beyond normal space-time. According to his notes, advanced species did not die out or transcend to pure energy as most galactic historians believed. Instead, they found ways to step sideways into parallel layers of reality. The universe is not a single layer, Peterson had written in his final research log. It's more like an onion with infinite layers, each one slightly different from the others. Most species live and die on one layer, never knowing that countless other versions of reality exist right next to them. Peterson's equation suggested that these parallel dimensions were not empty. They were populated by civilizations that had learned to exist in multiple layers simultaneously, using technology and knowledge that made normal physics look like children's games. But Peterson's most disturbing discovery was evidence that these shadow civilizations had been influencing galactic history for millions of years. Every major extinction event, every unexplained technological leap, every mysterious disappearance of an advanced species has been the result of interference from beings that exist between dimensions, Peterson wrote. They've been fighting a war across multiple realities, and they've been using normal space civilizations as pawns in their cosmic game. The research notes included detailed analysis of historical events that the Council had always attributed to natural causes or random chance. The fall of the ancient hegemony, which had ruled half the galaxy before mysteriously collapsing in a single day. The plague that had eliminated the conqueror species, just as they were about to launch a war of total galactic domination. The sudden appearance of faster-than-light technology that had allowed smaller species to compete with ancient empires. All of these events, according to Peterson's research, had been carefully orchestrated by beings that existed in the spaces between dimensions. They had been manipulating galactic development for eons, treating entire species as pieces on a game board that stretched across infinite realities. The Shadow War has been raging for millions of years, Peterson's notes continued. Two major factions of trans-dimensional beings have been fighting for control of what they call the primary layer, our normal space-time. The winner of this war will not just control our galaxy, but every possible version of it across all parallel realities. Dr. Zenorth felt his scientific worldview crumbling as he read Peterson's research. Everything the Council thought they knew about their place in the universe was wrong. They were not independent civilizations making their own choices about their future. They were pawns in a cosmic game played by beings so advanced that they existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. But Peterson's final notes revealed something even more terrifying. Humanity has made contact with one of the shadow factions, Peterson wrote in his last entry. They call themselves the Resistance, beings from dead realities who refuse to accept the control of the dominant shadow faction. The Resistance has been losing the war for millions of years because they lack something that the controllers have in abundance: unpredictability. Peterson explained that the dominant shadow faction, which he called the Architects, had achieved their power through perfect order and absolute control. They could predict and manipulate the behavior of normal space civilizations because most species followed logical, predictable patterns when faced with challenges. But humans were different. Human behavior is genuinely chaotic in ways that confuse even trans-dimensional entities, Peterson wrote. We make decisions based on emotions, take risks that make no logical sense, and find solutions to problems by doing things that should not work but somehow do. This chaos is exactly what the Resistance needs to break the Architect's perfect control. The signals from the Kepler void were not random transmissions. They were coordination signals between human forces and their trans-dimensional allies, preparing for a war that would determine the fate of every possible version of reality. As Dr. Zenorth finished reading Peterson's research, alarms began sounding throughout the monitoring station. The signals from the void had suddenly intensified, and the mysterious constructs at the edge of Council space were moving. Dr. Zenorth, Shardara called out, her crystal body flashing with urgent patterns. We're detecting massive energy buildups in 17 different sectors. Whatever the humans and their allies are preparing for, it's about to begin. The Shadow War was no longer hidden in the spaces between dimensions. It was coming to their reality, and humanity had chosen to fight alongside forces that existed beyond the understanding of every other species in the galaxy. The Council had spent months worrying about where the humans had gone. Now they faced a far more terrifying question. When the humans returned, what cosmic forces would be coming with them? The universe was about to learn that some silences were not empty. They were the quiet moments before reality itself was torn apart and rebuilt according to rules that no one had ever imagined. The war between order and chaos was coming to normal space, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The return of humanity did not happen quietly. Reality itself seemed to crack open across 17 different star systems as massive rifts tore through space-time, releasing energies that made Council sensors scream warnings about impossible readings. The tiers in normal space glowed with colors that had no names, pulsing with rhythms that seemed to match the heartbeats of sleeping gods. From these rifts emerged ships that hurt to look at directly. The vessels were recognizably human in their basic design. Council observers could identify the angular hull plating and the distinctive engine configurations that human engineers preferred. But something was wrong with them in ways that made experienced space traffic controllers question their own sanity. The hull metal seemed to shift between solid matter and translucent energy, appearing thick and protective from one angle while looking like it was made of crystallized light from another. The engine signatures registered as both matter and antimatter simultaneously, creating readings that should have meant the ships were exploding and perfectly stable. At the same time, most disturbing of all, the human vessels moved through space, as if distance was merely a polite suggestion, rather than a fundamental law of physics. Captain Jake Morrison's voice crackled across every communication frequency in Council space, but it carried strange harmonics that seemed to resonate in dimensions beyond normal hearing. When he spoke, listeners felt his words not just in their ears, but in parts of their consciousness they had never known existed. Council Command, this is Captain Morrison of the Aurora's Edge. The transmission began, sounding both familiar and utterly alien. We apologize for our extended absence. We've been learning some things about the universe that we thought you should know. The Aurora's Edge materialized in normal space near the Council's main headquarters station, but observers noted that it seemed to exist in multiple locations simultaneously. Sensor readings showed the ship in 17 different positions at once, as if it had learned to exist in several realities at the same time. But Jake's ship was not alone. Following the Aurora's Edge came a fleet of vessels that defied every category of known spacecraft. Some appeared to be grown rather than built, their organic surfaces pulsing with biomechanical rhythms that suggested they were somehow alive. Others looked like they had been constructed from crystallized starlight, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy depending on how observers tried to focus on them. A few ships seemed to be made from folded spacetime itself, creating geometric shapes that existed in more dimensions than normal eyes could process. Looking at them directly caused headaches and vertigo, as if the human brain was trying to understand something it was never designed to comprehend. Admiral Connor Hayes, who had once commanded the human defense fleet before the Great Disappearance, opened direct communications with the Council leadership. His image appeared on view screens throughout Council space, but technical officers noticed that his reflection in the glossy surfaces of the screens did not quite match his appearance, as if he existed slightly out of phase with normal reality. Council members, we know you have questions about where we went and why we left without explanation, Hayes said, his voice carrying that same strange multidimensional quality that Morrison's transmission had possessed. The simple answer is that we discovered the universe is much larger and more dangerous than any of us ever imagined. Hayes gestured to something outside the camera's view, and the display shifted to show star charts that included layers of reality, beyond the three-dimensional space that normal species could perceive. The map showed the familiar galaxy overlaid with additional structures that existed in parallel dimensions, populated by civilizations that had transcended the normal limitations of matter and energy. We call them the architects, Hayes explained, his words causing subtle reality distortions that made the air around council receivers shimmer slightly. They've been manipulating galactic development for millions of years, treating entire species as pawns in a game that spans multiple realities. Every major historical event, every unexplained extinction, every technological breakthrough that seemed to come from nowhere, all orchestrated by beings who view normal space civilizations the way we might view bacteria in a laboratory. Dr. E. Elena Rodriguez appeared in the transmission, but her presence seemed to bend light around her in ways that suggested she had learned to exist partially outside normal space-time. She stood in what appeared to be a laboratory that existed in several dimensions simultaneously, with equipment that seemed to be built from crystallized mathematics and pure thought. The architects have been preparing for their final move, Rodriguez continued, her voice carrying harmonics that made listeners feel like they were hearing secrets whispered by the universe itself. They plan to collapse all dimensional barriers, merging every parallel reality into a single controlled universe where they can maintain absolute order over everything that exists. The implications hit the council leadership like a supernova. Not only were they pawns in a cosmic game they had never known existed, but the very nature of reality was about to be fundamentally changed by beings they could not even properly perceive. But we found allies, Hayes announced, and the transmission expanded to show the impossible vessels that had accompanied humanity back to normal space. Other species that learned the truth about the architects and chose to fight back. They've been waging a losing war for millions of years, waiting for a species chaotic enough and adaptable enough to change the balance of power. The Allied ships defied description or classification. Some appeared to be living mathematics given physical form, their surfaces covered with equations that solved themselves in real time. Others looked like conscious gravitational fields that had learned to think and move independently. A few seemed to be sentient spacetime itself, existing as areas where the fundamental forces of physics had developed awareness and purpose. The resistance, as they call themselves, represents civilizations from realities that the architects have already conquered or destroyed, Rodriguez explained. They exist in the spaces between dimensions, fighting to prevent the architects from achieving total control over all possible versions of existence. The display showed images of beings that hurt to contemplate, entities made from living light that could think faster than computers, creatures that existed as pure consciousness distributed across multiple realities, and forms of life based on principles that had no equivalent in normal space. The architects are preparing their final assault, Hayes announced, his words carrying a weight that seemed to make reality itself heavier. They're going to begin collapsing dimensional barriers in approximately 1 standard year. When that happens, every parallel version of our galaxy will be merged into a single reality under their absolute control. The council chamber erupted in panicked discussions as representatives tried to process information that challenged everything they thought they knew about existence. Species that had considered themselves advanced found themselves struggling to understand concepts that human minds had somehow learned to grasp. Chancellor Morrison, ancient and wise beyond the experience of most living beings, raised his hand for silence. His multiple eyes focused on the human transmission with something that might have been respect mixed with terror. "What do you need from us?" the Chancellor asked, his voice steady despite the cosmic implications of what he had just learned. Hayes smiled, and for a moment he looked like the humans the Council remembered, reckless, optimistic, and absolutely convinced they could overcome impossible odds through sheer stubborn determination. "Everything," he said simply. "We're going to war against beings that consider themselves gods, and we're going to need every species, every ship, every creative mind in the galaxy working together. The architects have perfect order and absolute control, but they've never faced anything like a united galaxy full of beautiful, chaotic, unpredictable life." Rodriguez stepped forward in the transmission, her form flickering between human and something far more complex. "We've learned things during our absence that will help, but the coming war will require more than just knowledge. It will require every species in the galaxy to become something more than they ever thought possible." The transmission ended with coordinates for meeting points throughout Council space. locations where human and resistance forces would begin training other species in techniques that existed beyond normal physics. The message was clear. The galaxy had perhaps 1 year to prepare for a war that would determine whether free will and chaos would survive, or whether perfect order would reshape all possible realities according to the architect's design. As the impossible human fleet dispersed to begin their preparations, Council leaders faced a choice that no government in galactic history had ever confronted. They could try to remain neutral in a conflict that spanned multiple dimensions, or they could join humanity in a war against forces that treated gods as equals. The silence had ended, but what followed would test whether the combined chaos of galactic civilization could stand against the perfect order of beings that had spent millions of years believing they were the rightful rulers of all possible worlds. The war began not with explosions or grand battles, but with reality itself starting to come apart at the edges. Across the galaxy, space-time developed cracks that looked like broken glass made of starlight. Through these fissures, observers could see glimpses of other realities, versions of their own worlds where different choices had been made, where different species had evolved, where the very laws of physics operated according to different rules. The architects had grown tired of working from the shadows. Admiral Connor Hayes stood on the bridge of the Aurora's edge, now a vessel that existed in 7 dimensions simultaneously, while somehow remaining recognizably human in its core design. Around him, beings from impossible realities worked alongside humans who had learned to think in ways that transcended normal consciousness. The bridge itself defied conventional understanding. Control panels were made from crystallized mathematics that responded to thought rather than touch. Navigation displays showed not just normal space but the layers of parallel realities that existed alongside their own dimension. Crew members included humans who had learned to exist partially outside space-time, working with entities made of living equations and conscious gravitational fields. Dimensional breach opening in Sector 12, reported Lieutenant Kate Miller. Her consciousness now distributed across multiple probability streams, so she could monitor several realities at once. The architects are manifesting directly into our dimension. What emerged from the breach challenged every concept of physical existence that normal minds could grasp. The architect entities were not creatures in any conventional sense. They were living concepts given form, mathematical principles that had developed consciousness and learned to reshape reality according to their perfect understanding of order. Where they moved through space, stars aged thousands of years in moments, planets developed impossible geometries that hurt to observe, and entire solar systems were reorganized according to equations that prioritized efficiency over the chaotic beauty of natural development. One architect entity stretched across light years of space, its form consisting of interconnected geometric shapes that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. It moved through normal space like a virus spreading through healthy tissue, converting everything it touched into perfect mathematical expressions of order and control. But humanity had learned to fight impossibility with chaos. Captain Rachel Stone led the dimensional assault teams, humans who had trained in the spaces between realities and learned to weaponize the very unpredictability that made their species so difficult for other beings to understand. Her team materialized inside the architect construct using transportation methods that violated several fundamental laws of physics. Initiating chaos protocols, Stone reported as her team began their work. They moved through the entity's perfect mathematical structure like vandals in a pristine museum, introducing deliberate mistakes into flawless systems, creating beautiful imperfections that spread through the construct like cracks in perfect crystal. The humans did not try to destroy the architect directly. Instead, they did something far more devastating to a being of perfect order. They introduced random variables into its calculations. Stone quote, "S team planted seeds of uncertainty throughout the entity's consciousness. They asked questions that had no logical answers, made choices that defied rational analysis, and created art from the mathematical equations that formed the creature's thoughts. For a being that existed as pure logic, the introduction of purposeful chaos was more destructive than any conventional weapon. The architect entity convulsed, as human irrationality corrupted its core processes. Its perfect geometric forms began developing organic curves and random variations. Its mathematical thoughts became infected with poetry, music, and the kind of beautiful nonsense that only humans seemed capable of creating. Across the galaxy, the pattern repeated wherever architect entities manifested into normal space. Dr. Elena Rodriguez coordinated the scientific effort from her mobile laboratory, now a structure that existed in multiple dimensions and several different timelines, simultaneously. Her research had evolved beyond conventional physics into something that resembled applied philosophy, using human creativity to rewrite the fundamental rules that the architects used to maintain their version of reality. "We're not trying to destroy them," Rodriguez explained to council observers who watched the battle with a mixture of awe and terror. "We're teaching them something they've never experienced, uncertainty. For beings that have controlled every variable for millions of years, doubt is more terrifying than death." The war's turning point came when Commander Lisa Grant made a discovery that changed everyone's understanding of what they were fighting. Deep in architect space, in a region where reality had been compressed into pure mathematical perfection, Grant found evidence that the entities were not originally conquerors. Hidden within their perfect structures were memories of another universe, another reality that had been destroyed by too much chaos, too much change, too much unpredictability. "They're not evil," Grant reported from the heart of an architect stronghold, her voice carrying across dimensions to reach the human command structure. "They're terrified. They're the survivors of a universe that died from excessive chaos, and they've been trying to prevent the same thing from happening to ours." The revelation transformed the entire nature of the conflict. The architects were refugees from a reality where uncontrolled change had caused the fundamental forces of physics to break down. They had watched their home universe tear itself apart as species evolved too quickly, as technology advanced beyond the ability to control it, as chaos overwhelmed the delicate balance needed for existence to continue. They had escaped to parallel dimensions and spent millions of years imposing order on other realities, not from a desire to rule, but from a desperate need to prevent the kind of chaotic collapse that had destroyed everything they had once known. "They see us as the beginning of another cascade failure," Grant continued, her words reaching human forces throughout the galaxy. "Every time we do something unpredictable, every time we break their carefully constructed order, they see the same patterns that destroyed their original home." Admiral Hayes made a decision that would have seemed impossible to any military commander in galactic history. Instead of pressing their advantage against the weakened architect forces, he ordered a complete ceasefire and requested direct communication with the primary architect entity. The meeting took place not in normal space, but in a conceptual realm, where ideas became physical reality and thoughts had mass and substance. Captain Jake Morrison, now existing as much as a concept as a person, met with the vast intelligence that served as the primary architect consciousness. The architect entity appeared as a structure of perfect crystalline mathematics, its thoughts visible as geometric patterns that calculated the probability of every possible outcome. It was beautiful in its absolute precision, terrifying in its complete lack of randomness. "You fear what we represent," Morrison said, his words creating ripples in the fabric of conceptual space that took the form of music and abstract art. "But chaos is not destruction, it's possibility. Your perfect order is beautiful, but it's also sterile. Let us show you what happens when perfect structure meets creative disorder." The negotiation that followed took place across multiple dimensions and several different time streams simultaneously. Humans demonstrated that controlled chaos could create beauty rather than destruction, that randomness guided by purpose could lead to innovation and growth rather than collapse. They showed the architects examples of how human unpredictability had led to breakthrough discoveries, how chaotic creativity had solved problems that perfect logic could not address, how the introduction of random elements into ordered systems often made those systems stronger and more adaptable. In return, the architects shared their knowledge of cosmic-scale organization, showing humans how to build structures that could span galaxies while remaining stable, how to organize civilizations in ways that prevented the kind of destructive conflicts that had torn apart their original universe. The final agreement rewrote the fundamental nature of reality across all parallel dimensions. The architects would withdraw from direct control of normal space civilizations, maintaining the underlying mathematical stability that kept the universe functional, while allowing organic chaos to flourish within that stable framework. In return, humanity would serve as mediators between order and chaos, ensuring that creative unpredictability never again threatened to unravel the basic structures that made existence possible. The war ended not with victory or defeat, but with synthesis. When the dimensional barriers stabilized and reality settled into its new configuration, the galaxy found itself fundamentally changed. The Council now governed not just their own species, but served as part of a larger structure that spanned multiple dimensions and included both organic chaos and perfect mathematical order. Architect entities worked alongside human engineers to design impossible structures that combined perfect efficiency with chaotic beauty.